Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries. I'm John, your host, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about money in D&D. So, cue the music. Now, depending on how you look at it, money is quite a big part of your standard D&D game, specifically treasure. After all, part of the reason you tend to quest into dungeons and places that are extremely dangerous, as well as for the renown and the ability to gain fantabulous magic items, is the money, the readies that come from delving into these dungeons, finding ancient caches of coins, chests full of gold, as long as they're not a mimic, and stuff like that. But if you're anything like me, beyond the fact that money exists in treasure hoards, you maybe don't tend to think overly much about sort of the economics of money and how it gets spent, how it's earned, sort of lifestyle expenses and stuff like that. Now, don't worry about it. I'm not going to get into some massively detailed treatise on the economics of a medieval style fantasy world, because I'm not really qualified to talk about that. I'm sure there's people out there who are, and I know there's books that lean more heavily into that. So why did I start thinking about this? Well, in my Old School Essentials campaign, Smoke Snow, we've just got into a situation through various means that I won't go into because I don't want to lengthen the episode too much. One of our characters, Weimar, has found himself in the position of the Knight's Defender of a town. So effectively he's one of the two rulers of this town. There's the mayor, who deals with the politicking, the mercantile interests, stuff like that, and there is the defender, who deals with military matters, defence, stuff like that. Now, this has only just happened, and I was doing a little bit of prep for my next session, and it occurred to me that, well, effectively Weimar has now got a steady job, really, and most of us in the sort of real world, well, we tend to do a job because it provides us with money to pay for our bills, our houses, our hobbies, stuff like that. So that started me down the rabbit hole of thinking, well, how much money would he actually get paid for doing this job? And then I did a bit of looking around in the various versions of D&D that I've got, and I've not looked exhaustively through all of them, so it's possible I have missed something. If I have, feel free to drop us a message or an email, details later, to tell me what I've missed. I'd love to catch up on any of that. But it led to me scouting around for potentially other resources. I thought someone else is bound to have delved into this before me. And I'm a great believer that, if someone else has already done the legwork in terms of like an RPG, and they've got far better expertise and far more nous for this than I have, then I'm not above leaning into their research and using it to inform my own decisions in game. And now I eventually, on Reddit of all things, found a post called 5e Commoner Life and Economy, and it's in a Reddit called D&D Behind the Screen, posted by someone with the username BjornBob1234. And in it, they were trying to figure out how the economy surrounding commoners works in 5e, saying that a common complaint against D&D is the farmer's inability to actually live with the prices provided by the game books. So, according to 5e, on page 159, unskilled workers are paid 2 silver pieces per day, while skilled workers, anyone performing a service that needs a proficiency, are paid 2 gold pieces a day. And using that, he and the various costs of the different sort of mercenaries, henchmen and stuff you can get, he worked out a table ranging from poor, unskilled labourers having a minimum income each month of 60 silver pieces, up to aristocrats, politicians, guild leaders, etc., having a minimum income of 3,000 silver pieces per month. However, as we know from various versions of D&D, there's also a price associated with maintaining a particular lifestyle. And as it stands at the moment, according to the details on here, the minimum income is exactly the same as the lifestyle, so you wouldn't basically get any profit, which seems a little bit unlikely, because if you didn't have any profit, well, you wouldn't have any extra money to do anything else, repair your hut or buy those fabulous noble clothes or whatever. So after a bit of playing around, the author came up with a lifestyle maintenance cost of a third of the initial income. So a poor unskilled labourer would get a minimum income of 60 silver pieces a month. To maintain their lifestyle, they'd have to spend 30 silver pieces a month. And then there was a small amount of sort of upkeep, you know, like repairing your home and stuff like that, that was added on, which comes to 20 silver pieces a month, which means their profit will be 10 silver pieces a month. An aristocrat earns their 3,000 silver pieces. Maintaining their lifestyle is like 50% of that, so they spend 1,500 silver pieces, and their upkeep is another 1,000 silver pieces. So at the end of each month, they're getting 500 silver pieces profit. And this started to look pretty cool as far as I can see. But then the dreaded spectre of the taxman rears its head. And as we all know from real life, there's only two things in this world you can't avoid. And no, I don't mean Twitter arguments and drama or the debate on what OSR means. I mean death and taxes, of course. And I wasn't really expecting the author to go into this, but he said, yeah, you know, there should be a certain amount of tax that will be levied against you. That's how kingdoms raise their funds, etc. So, trying to sort of pick a fairly roundabout figure, the author set the tax rate at 10%. Now, obviously, you can tweak that for your game, depending on if it's a despotic ruler or a kind ruler, as it was in this case. But with a figure of 10%, we effectively have the unskilled labourer earning 6 gold pieces a month. They spend 3 gold pieces maintaining their lifestyle, 2 on upkeep, 6 silver pieces on taxes a month, and that leaves them with 4 silver pieces at the end. Whereas the aristocrat earns 300 gold pieces a month, they spend 150 gold pieces on lifestyle, 100 on upkeep, an extra 30 on taxes, which leaves them with a 20 gold piece profit each month. And there are some additional brackets within that, such as modest, you know, soldiers with families, etc., comfortable, merchants, skilled, tradespeople, etc., and wealthy, highly successful merchants and stuff like that, or the owner of a few small businesses that haven't quite ascended to the levels of the aristocracy. And there's various sort of breakdowns using this formula for that. Now, as the author quite rightly says in this Reddit post, and like I say, I've not come up with any of this, all credit to the author, and I'll put a link to this in the description. They realise that money is an abstraction in D&D, and you only need to lean into this as much or as a little as you want. And it's certainly not something I'd considered before this point in the game. Money had just been the abstract sort of treasure hoard. At the most, we dabbled in the players spending a certain amount of money every month to keep their henchmen, their ridiculously expensive sage, quelac and stuff like that going. And also when they wanted to build some fortifications around their hometown, we sort of hashed out a few costs and how long it was going to take with that. But beyond that, we'd not really given any thought to the money. It was just an abstract reward for a perilous adventure. And obviously, because we're using sort of treasure as XP as well, it obviously provided an XP bump. But beyond that, and buying equipment here and there, it wasn't really used for a great deal. But now potentially the player characters are starting to become slightly more like movers and shakers in the game. Like I said, we've got Weimar, who's moving into this position of military power and sort of rulership over a town. We've got Dave's character, Quentin, who's getting in with the Thieves Guild and potentially looking to work his way up within that organisation. We're potentially at the point where the player characters, for want of a better term, they're actually going to have real, in inverted commas, jobs. And I think, you know, most people aren't going to keep doing a job if it doesn't bring them in some money, because obviously you get responsibilities from your job. So Weimar's going to be facing the inconveniences of having people coming up to him and asking him questions and having to sort out problems that deal with the defence of the town and stuff like that. And well, it only seems fair, if you want to put it that way, that while you're dealing with all these problems, you also get the wage reward at the end of each month or whatever period it is, as a result of having that job. So I've really enjoyed looking at this table and this post. It was broken down in an extremely easy to understand manner. If you've got any thoughts about sort of how people should earn money and stuff like that in your campaign world, like I say, it's based around D&D 5th edition, but I'm running OSE, and I don't see it being a real problem. I think you could adapt it to most versions of D&D. I definitely suggest giving this a Reddit post a look. Like I say, I'll put a link in the description of this show. And it's also got me thinking about other ways in which money could be used. And I've heard people talking about the fact that beyond buying a bit of equipment here and there, most stuff in D&D, most loot is recovered. So you don't really tend to spend money on a lot. That's why there's a profusion of carousing tables and the stuff like that out there for you to spend your money on. I've seen a few other OSR clones that lean into, you know, funding a business, funding an organisation, stuff like that. But we've never really delved into it in the games that I've run. But this Reddit post has definitely got me thinking about that. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to turn this into a simulation or sort of spreadsheet heavy game. The businesses, the wages and stuff like that is definitely going to be staying in the background, but I use a calendar module in Foundry. Well, at the end of each month, it pops up a note saying the player characters need to pay X amount of gold to keep all of their henchmen happy. It's not difficult for me to add to that note saying, oh, and also Weimar has earned amount of gold pieces. So I've not decided on the exact amount yet, but he's going to earn that at the end of each month. And just having that sort of, I suppose, income, I mean, let's face it, you're not going to just sit around and go, oh, well, never mind, I don't need to do any adventuring now, I'm just going to sit here and collect my wage and do whatever. But just having that extra income gives you a little bit of pocket money and a little bit of room to play with. And it's also adding an extra level of detail to the campaign world, which, to be honest, beyond this little bit of research and like reading a few Reddit posts I've done, hasn't taken me an awful lot of work to do. But it creates this illusion, this impression that things are going on in the background. People have everyday jobs, stuff like that. It also gives me the impetus. So if someone says to me like, oh, we've raided this farmer's hut, like how much money has he got in there? I can look at this table and I can produce consistent results for things like that. So I definitely think it's been a worthwhile endeavour spending these few minutes having a quick search around on the internet. So I hope you've enjoyed this slightly rambly episode about money in D&D. How do you use money in your games? Maybe drop us a line and let us know if you've got any comments on this or any other episodes, or you just want to chat about D&D. We'd love to hear from you. And if you leave us a voicemail, it might be featured in a future bonus episode. You can leave us a voicemail using Anchor or SpeakPipe, again, link in the descriptions below, or you can send us an email to rddrpgpodcast@gmail.com. Until we see you next time, take care, stay safe, and whenever you're playing, have fun.